On the 20th of July, 1973, the world lost one of the most electrifying figures it had ever seen. Bruce Lee, martial artist, philosopher, filmmaker, and full-blown global superstar, was gone at just 32 years old. And here's the thing that still gets me. On paper, the cause of death sounds pretty simple, but the more you dig into it, the weirder it gets. This has honestly become one of the most argued over mysteries in pop culture, and I get why. How does a guy in absolutely peak physical shape, the literal poster child for strength and discipline, just drop dead out of nowhere? Was it an accident, some hidden medical condition, or something a lot darker? Today, we're separating the myths from the actual medical evidence and walking through what really happened. Let's get into it, right here on History of Simple Things. But before we get to how he died, you've got to understand who Bruce Lee actually was by 1973. He was born in San Francisco, raised in Hong Kong, and he'd been training in martial arts since he was a kid. Eventually, he built his own philosophy and fighting style, jeet kune, which was all about efficiency, adaptability, and cutting straight to the point. No wasted movement. But honestly, it wasn't just his skill that made him a star. It was his presence. The guy lit up the screen. Movies like The Big Boss and Fist of Fury turned him into a sensation across Asia. Then came Enter the Dragon, produced by Warner Brothers, the film that was supposed to introduce him to Western audiences and lock in his legacy for good. And here's the part that gives me chills every time. Just 6 days before Enter the Dragon hit American theaters, Bruce Lee was dead. So let's talk about that day. Lee was in Hong Kong, working on a new project called Game of Death. That afternoon, he stopped by the apartment of actress Betty Ting to go over scripts and talk about future plans. At some point, he mentioned he had a headache. Nothing dramatic, just a headache. So later that evening, Ting gave him a pretty common painkiller called Equagesic. It contained aspirin and a tranquilizer ingredient called meprobamate. He went to lie down for a bit, and he never woke up. When he didn't respond, they called a doctor and rushed him to the hospital. But by the time he got there, it was already too late. He was pronounced dead at 32. They performed an autopsy, and the finding was cerebral edema. In plain English, that's swelling of the brain. And we're not talking about a little swelling. His brain had reportedly ballooned from around 1,400 grams to about 1,575. The medical examiner figured the swelling was a reaction to the Equagesic, specifically that meprobamate ingredient. The official ruling? Death by misadventure, which basically means an accidental death caused by a bad reaction to medication. No external injuries, no poison, no signs of foul play whatsoever. On paper, that should have been the end of the story. But if you ask me, this is exactly where things start getting interesting, because the questions were just getting started. Here's a detail a lot of people don't know. 2 months earlier, on the 10th of May, 1973, Bruce Lee had already had a terrifying medical scare. He was dubbing dialogue for Enter the Dragon when he suddenly collapsed. He had seizures and got rushed to the hospital. And guess what they found? Brain swelling. Same thing. They ran a bunch of tests, including a spinal tap, but couldn't find any drugs in his system except cannabis. They treated him, got him stable, and sent him home. At the time, everybody chalked it up to a one-off fluke. But looking back now, that collapse looks a whole lot like a warning sign that something deeper was going on under the surface. Now, whenever somebody young, famous, and seemingly unstoppable dies out of nowhere, the conspiracy theories aren't far behind. And boy, did they come. Some people swore he'd been assassinated by martial arts rivals. Others were convinced he was poisoned. There were even wild rumors about secret societies putting a curse on him. But here's the thing. Not a shred of evidence ever backed any of it up. Then there was the heat stroke theory, which is actually a little more grounded. Lee had reportedly gotten the sweat glands removed from his underarms after an old injury, which could have messed with his body's ability to cool itself down. Throw in Hong Kong's brutal, sticky summer heat, and some folks figured that might have played a part. Problem is, the medical records from the day he died didn't show a dangerously high body temperature. So that one kind of falls apart too. And honestly, I think that's why this mystery just refuses to die. Not because there's proof of anything shady, but because people simply couldn't wrap their heads around it. How does someone that disciplined, that in control of his own body, just die? Then in 2022, nearly 50 years later, a new theory popped up in a medical journal, and this one actually caught my attention. Researchers suggested Lee may have died from hyponatremia. That's a condition where you drink so much water that you dilute the sodium in your blood. And when your sodium drops too low, it can trigger brain swelling, seizures, coma, even death. They pointed to a few things: Lee's reportedly high fluid intake, the prescription meds he was taking, and possible kidney issues that might have kept his body from flushing out water the way it should. And here's why it's compelling. Hyponatremia absolutely can cause cerebral edema, so it actually fits the autopsy. The catch is, it's still just a theory. There's no preserved blood sample from 1,973 to check his sodium levels, so we can't confirm it. But I'll be honest, I find it pretty satisfying. It's a real medical explanation that doesn't need a single secret society to make sense. Here's another detail that surprised me. In the months before he died, Bruce Lee had lost a serious amount of weight. He was around 5'7" and reportedly down to about 135 pounds, with insanely low body fat, possibly under 5%. Friends and colleagues actually noticed he looked thinner than usual. And look, Lee was famous for pushing himself to the absolute limit. Brutal training sessions, super strict dieting, a workaholic to the core. The man never let up. So some people believe the combination of stress, weight loss, and flat-out overtraining might have left his body more fragile than anyone realized. And there's a real irony in that, isn't there? Because adaptability and the limits of the physical body were exactly the kinds of things Bruce Lee talked about all the time in his philosophy. He was the very symbol of strength, but at the end of the day, he was still human. Still mortal, just like the rest of us. And here's what we know for sure: no theories required. Bruce Lee changed martial arts forever. He reshaped cinema. He smashed through stereotypes that needed smashing. And he inspired generation after generation of fighters, actors, and thinkers who are still chasing his example today. Thanks so much for watching. If you've got ideas for what we should cover next, drop them in the comments. And if we use yours, we'll be sure to give you a shout out for it. Thanks for coming along with us on this journey through the history of simple things. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stick around for more stories hiding in the smallest details.